Welcome, everyone. It is beautiful here in DC. I hope it is sunshine where you are at. We are excited for our topic today, and I'll open up with some questions. One question would be, what are the ingredients to a successful value management practice and team? How do you think about the value that you communicate to your customers and the dimensions of value? What are the skills and traits and attributes that make somebody very proficient in being able to communicate a value story? And then finally, how do we look at the measurement of success around the value management team? These are really provocative questions. We're going to have our characteristic engaged session today in the advisory to kind of go through those. Our guide, if you will, our facilitator in these discussions is Dave Klippel. Dave has 25 years of experience in structuring value for companies like HP and NetApp. His most recent leadership role is with Palo Alto Networks, where he's Director of Value Services. So he's eminently qualified to talk on this topic and share his journey. Dave and I know each other going on about 3 years, and what I know of Dave is he's thoughtful, he's prepared, and he's very passionate on this topic of value, which will make for a great facilitator. And I know in talking with Dave before, we talked about the fact that we have leaders on this advisory that are coming from sales enablement. We have folks coming from sales leadership. We have folks that are actually value practitioners in their own businesses. So we have a lot of thought diversity, if you will, on this topic of value. And so as we go through this discussion, we've created what we call these little pause points. And that's a chance for us to have the wisdom of the ecosystem or the wisdom of the crowd to talk about your own insights, your own perspective in your value journey as we listen to Dave's. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave and allow him to kind of talk through his journey.
Thank you, Chad. And once again, I want to thank Ecosystems and everyone in your organization for providing this forum and allowing, well, for me personally, to learn from this group. And I'm thankful that I have the opportunity to share back. And I certainly welcome everyone's participation through this conversation that we have today. I welcome it. And I think what I would like to do is perhaps set the table a little bit before we advance to the next slide, which is that I've had an opportunity to be involved in a business value initiative or program at 3 separate companies. They all seem to have blue logos for some reason. I'll have to explore that. But in the context of today's presentation, I'm currently involved in being a leader within the cybersecurity industry. My company provides products and services that span about 15 different products and service lines. And we sell and market this to approximately over 50,000 customers worldwide. And we only face 3,000 competitors in cybersecurity. And so what makes this particularly interesting for me professionally is that cybersecurity value proposition really stretches the muscles, if you will, with respect to business value. And there are numerous reasons why that's true, but ultimately cybersecurity is not just a technology, but it's something that is on the consciousness of C-level executives and even board-level executives. And they want to understand and receive value, if you will, in a different way than technologists do. So we have a 3-dimensional chess game here, and really look forward to this presentation. So the next slide is something I like to begin with. Throughout my career in business value, I must have heard these type of questions from sales leaders and corporate leaders when we're discussing the formation of a business value team or the growth of one. And I don't know if this group has heard these questions before, but they're pretty routine. We're pretty used to fielding them, if you will, and they're quite common. But I think what might be most, obvious in this is that we often hear, shouldn't sales be able to do this? And I never hear this question from field salespeople. I always hear it from, from up above. So if we could go to the next slide, I think the way to tee this up is fundamentally why. Why would an organization want to put a value management practice and a team in place in the first order? And I think the best way to express this is through humor. And I won't read the quote, but I often, in various industries I've come across, experience sales meetings that ultimately have a conclusion like this, which is many of us in this group are dealing with highly complex products and solutions sold to highly complex customers, and the integration of technical value and operational value and financial value is often laid on the shoulders of sales executives, and they already have a very tough job. And being able to pull together and integrate at the customer level and then be able to express that value is the area that we like to participate in. And that sets the stage, really, is what type of environments, at least I've been able to observe, where business value practice can thrive. And I would start with, of course, business-to-business sales. I don't have much experience in the consumer side. But when you observe complex value propositions, when the vendor has multiple product and service offerings, when we see an industry in transformation, moving from one technology state to another that requires a change in status quo, this is an opportunity to communicate value in a fundamentally different way. To my earlier point, when you're observing that your already burdened field sales force is being asked to integrate the many different solutions that the vendor provides at the customer level. And then most importantly, when sales asks for and wants to receive the help. My experience has been that when you introduce value management capabilities to a sales force and they see what a dedicated team can do, they really can't get enough of it. And so these are the characteristics where you would find fertile soil, if you will, for B2B sales and business value. And this message, I like to think of what we do as a voyage. We use the metaphor in our team all the time with respect to the journey that we're taking together, and we use the sea and sailing as a metaphor. But the point of this slide is to communicate that having observed this over now 3 different environments, what makes it fundamentally powerful in my mind is the unique integration of people, process, and technology, and implementing this in a very programmatic way. And I had the opportunity and the luxury at HP to be a part of a very well thought out and fully integrated program where business value was put right at the heart of this line of business that we were involved in. It was industrial printing. And in hindsight, I recognized that it was truly programmatic, that we had people, process, and technology highly tuned on the economic value of these $1 million printing presses. And quite interestingly, that was well over 15 years ago, and I still keep in touch with my peers there, and that program is still there, doing what it did 10 years ago, and it's matured, of course, but it's ingrained into the go-to-market of that organization. And then I had the opportunity to experience practicing business value in another environment, and this was quite rewarding. But realized several years into the journey that what was missing was the lack of a fully programmatic approach to it. And I referred to us as spreadsheet jockeys, and we were really good at it and valued by sales teams. But ultimately, because it wasn't fully integrated into the go-to-market approach, there was the inability to hold together this talent as a team. And we learned later that in the absence of a business value program, it made its way to leadership. And they said, oh, wow, we really like this business value. And at that stage, we had all moved on to other ventures. So that was a lesson learned for me. And when I had the opportunity to practice this at Palo Alto Networks, the starting point was, this is interesting only if we can scale it and replicate it and do it in a programmatic way. And so that's been a real blessing. And that's really the way we've approached it, is the thoughtful integration of highly skilled people and a team combined with a thought out go-to-market and service level design process, and integrating technology where it supports those two components. So the next slide is really a way to break out how we think in terms of customer value. And we think of it in three dimensions: technical, where we have our customer success organization focused; operational, where we primarily have our professional services organization focused; and then ultimately layering into that the financial dimension of customer value. And of course, each one of those dimensions has an impact on the customer's business outcome. And we like to express that in a business case that is using customers' language, their input to the process, and ultimately being able to communicate quantitative value in the language of the customer. We choose the business case and not a sales proposal to communicate that. So how do we define business value? It's a little bit like God and love. Everybody is going to bring their own meaning and definition to that. And I think it's highly contextual to the industry and the marketplace that you're in. But we gave a good thought to it. And ultimately, it comes down to how does the customer define business value in their industry and in their terms. And that's really something we remain highly focused on. I'm thinking, Chad, this might be a good pause point.
Yeah,
for the group.
I do too, Dave. Thank you. So great perspective on your background, your leadership across three companies. Dave kind of outlines these dimensions that he looked: the technical value discussion, the operational, and the financial. I wonder, for those out there in your own practices, how do you think about those dimensions? Are there others that you include, or any questions that you have in Dave's structuring of the dimensions of value? I think it's a great point to bring in some other thoughts here.
Yeah. Hey, this is Ron Elliott. How's everyone doing today? I just wanted to kind of focus in on delivery of business value and how it's expressed from the client's perspective. One of the things that I've done in the past as a sales enablement leader in working with my sellers is to make sure that they get back from the client how the client views business value, and not just business value, but unique business value for us. Because when we think about the products or the solutions or services that we are selling, as you stated earlier, Dave, you've got 3,000 competitors out there, right? So how are we unique, and how does our clients view us as unique in terms of business value that we bring to them? So getting our sellers to get that or extract that from our clients was very, very important for us, and teaching a seller how to ask the right questions so that the defined business value is expressed from the client's viewpoint.
This is Henry Solorzano. Hi, all. One other point was that oftentimes the client doesn't understand exactly how to measure the value that we're bringing in a particular solution. So I think a lot of this is actually is sitting down in workshop kind of format with the client, understanding their business and being able to help them come to understand what are the KPIs that they should be looking at, and then being able to model them accordingly. And then one other point was there's also the realization of benefit after the solution has been delivered. We promise that you're going to get this, or we suggest that they're going to get this particular benefit, but are they actually achieving that? And being able to meet with them on a quarterly basis and model, where they are in achievement of the benefit is, I think, also an important element in the go-to-market workflow.
Absolutely. So 2 key points there. Ron's point around differentiators, and that we really need to tease those out from the customer, because ultimately it's their perception of value and our unique value as a provider that holds the most weight. And then Henry's point about the prescription of KPIs that in many respects we're going to know the types of outcomes we can deliver. So our efforts to help be more guiding to the customer on the KPIs and then the value realization is critical. Dave, any comments on those 2 before we offer some other feedback?
Yes. And I think I could tie the 2 themes together, and what's foundational in our mind to doing this successfully, and that is helping the customer understand and realize the value from investment in technology, is a business value discovery session. We call them economic feasibility studies, and we seek executive sponsorship for this. We do this, of course, under non-disclosure. And it's a several-week engagement process. We focus on the Fortune 1000 when we do this. And it's a highly methodical process that we work side by side with our sales teams on. And we seek to uncover the both acknowledged business pains that the customer's having and the so-called unacknowledged business pain, and really exploring what are the business drivers at the technical level, at the operational level, the financial level, and what was left off my slide often is the strategic level of the company, which is how are they pivoting and where are they headed with their digital transformation journeys and so on. And so we take this insight, and ultimately measuring value across such a broad spectrum proves to be too much. So we tend to characterize the status quo environment inside the company and get agreement with the customer that this is the baseline of acknowledged business pain and unacknowledged business pain. And then we seek to uniquely differentiate ourselves and understand what is unique and different, not just baseline with respect to our offering. And that's where we concentrate our value efforts. And then ultimately to the second point, that's value promised. And once we go through the customer success journey, the customer wants to have proof that they've realized that business value. And so having established that baseline of status quo and the costs associated with it, we are able to begin a journey with them to show how the adoption, in our case of the platform, has enabled them to achieve value over time. So we do return to customers and prove value versus promise.
You do that for every single engagement?
We do this for select clients.
No, so you do select clients, right? You run the engagement to go back and recognize the value. Do you do a follow-up with every single one that you do?
I wouldn't say we were that programmatic. I would say that what drives it is the renewal cycles. And so the cadence is generally when there's an economic compelling event, and that question is often raised. And so we would answer that question.
So you mentioned too that you guys have a customer success program. Have you ever thought about working with those guys when they go back for the customer success side? It's something that I'm thinking about. I was just curious if you had similar thoughts.
Yeah, we work hand in hand with customer success and professional services and business value. We meet the customer and the sales team where they're at. And so sometimes there's a reason to go in together, and sometimes there's reasons why we want to just focus on one particular aspect of their value. It really is driven by the needs of the account.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent interchange there. Thank you, Dave. So that we cover some of these other topics, Dave, maybe we start to tackle kind of the charter and objectives for your team.
Right. So when we were given the charter, if you will, to begin building a program at scale, we spent some time on a concept called service level design. And one of the high-level exercises was, and I highly recommend this, is to establish a charter at the highest levels of leadership and gain agreement that that's what this program's all about. And in our case, what this meant was taking this next generation selling model, if you will, of value, and integrating it with a next generation selling team, which uses challenger principles or propagation selling principles that go back a decade now, and ultimately being very clear about what we deliver, which is a financially oriented business case and in the language of the customer. And the way we will measure success is, are we increasing the customer share of wallet? Are we growing lifetime value faster than a control group that doesn't get access to business value? Can we increase the sales cycle? Well, decrease the sales cycle in this case versus a control group? Can we get more efficient at what we're doing and cover more accounts? And support a shift in the marketplace. And also a very important point that gets overlooked, but along the journey or the voyage, we learn a lot. And part of our charter is to share this learning back to the organization, to the broader sales team that either wants to operate under their own power or just doesn't have access to the resource. And so we support this concept with strategy, and it started with building a really incredible team of people. And it's been just a terrific professional journey for me to work and build out a team like we have, and support that with a program and thought leadership. At the center of this is the customer, of course, and keeping very focused on who our first client is, which is sales, and then of course all the stakeholders that have a stake in the value of the company. So we interact with nearly every organization inside of my own company to support this program. Yeah. So one of the things that is really keen to our program is letting the sales organization know that you're our first client, and we're passionate about giving a very high level of service to them. And we have service level agreements with them. And we communicate in simple terms to them that we're here to write the business case and help quantify the value proposition. And they see it as a way to help them establish trusted advisor status at the higher levels of the organization, beyond just the technical level. But this program gives them access to a new echelon of decision makers, and they value that and our contribution to that. So ultimately, slide 13 says it all, I think, which is value is what we say it is together. It's a team sport. And by together, I really mean the customer, the sales team, our channel partners, and our own internal organization. And we make this a highly collaborative exercise, and our tools and our programs are oriented towards maximum customer involvement and engagement, because ultimately it's how they define value and validate that value that'll make the difference in the sales cycle. So this slide really brings it all together in terms of team building. And the common, the key thought that we have, and I'm passionate about, is building a common vision within the team, but including a wide range of thought diversity. We face such a broad and wide and fast-moving technology and marketplace that it was quite clear that we needed multiple disciplines to be able to communicate cybersecurity business value. So we've built a global virtual team in all our major geographies. And by design, this is a multidiscipline team. Foundationally, they all have to prove that they have some form of business value background. So that's the cost of entry, if you will. But I've recruited people from finance, from IT, from product management, from sales, marketing, and of course, cybersecurity. But I didn't lead with cybersecurity, interestingly enough. I recruited mostly around it because changing industries usually happens from without, not from within. And Chad taught me this term. I didn't realize we were doing it, but we have a mixture of analytical type folks and consulting backgrounds, and in about equal measure. We span 3 or 4 generations in my team, and several multilingual folks on our team. And we have geographic and gender diversity. We operate in almost every major time zone, which makes team meetings quite a challenge, but we manage to get it done. Somebody's up late and somebody's up early, but that's something we've learned to work around. And the other key aspect of this is that we spend quite a bit of time interviewing our team members, and we spend time making sure each team member gets to interview who's coming on board. But ultimately, we, or I, recognize a bird of a feather, if you will. So I recognize business value talent when I see it. I'm not sure I could explain how I do it, but you can recognize your own peer group pretty quickly. So that's how we've built our team. And I think this is a pause point.
It is, Dave. Thank you. Terrific part we just went through that segment on the team and how you look at the team. I know if I was channeling Pete Smirov, and I hope Pete's on the phone, I know he had a question about, you know, is it better to hire somebody who has curiosity and is financially astute, or go with somebody from the outside with experience? I'll let Pete jump in here maybe on some questions about how you look at team members and evaluate.
Yeah, so it's a classic, you know, buy versus build question. And what I found is that different teams have such different cultures and views on what the value measurement function is. You know, I chose in the past the build scenario because the culture was so important. So I'm just wondering if you went with the buy, does that actually cause challenges, or is it something that creates opportunities from different viewpoints?
It's a really great question. I think I've learned in life that it's always and not or. And I was given the charter to buy talent and to grow talent. And so we've done that in roughly equal measure, depending on the circumstances. And I think we've had successful outcomes in both cases. One that really sticks to my mind is that I remember identifying an individual that was new to business value, new to cybersecurity, new to corporate life, actually. But I saw a lot of analytical talent and passion, and took a chance and got a lot of grief from sales leaders why I chose this individual over others that had come from the industry. But I was encouraged to stick with it. And that individual's turned into a star member of our team. And you couldn't pull this individual away from that individual from those sales leaders if you tried. And so it was a real lesson that you could recruit for passion and innate talent and grow pretty quickly within under a year. And then vice versa, we've hired very experienced business value talent that just hits the ground running and gets the job done. So I'm encouraging of both approaches. It really depends on the individual and the situation.
Hey Dave, this is Steve Fitz. Appreciate you walking through this. We're kind of early in our value management journey, and this is very helpful because you've been through it 3 times before. I'm curious, and we live in a SaaS world, pure play SaaS world. So I'm curious from your perspective of learnings that you had to both fund the investment and to quantify the investment to the key stakeholders, including, board members that you could, that we could learn from your side, because, this is I believe it's an investment that any SaaS company needs, but it's also a funding challenge as well, and the trade-offs associated with that. So is there anything in, Palo Alto or HP or NetApp that you could share there?
Yes, I think I could. Ultimately, I believe that there was a recognition in two of those three cases, or those three companies I worked in, where someone at the board level identified that this was important, given the nature of the environment that the company was in. So I do believe that there's been valuable board sponsorship. But at the same time, I know that in two of those same cases, it was really grassroots sales leadership that identified that there was a financial gap in the sales motion. And it was ultimately field and sales leadership that summoned up the initial requisitions and resources to incubate, if you will, the program. And you can say that when these programs are born in sales, which is my view, that's the place to incubate them, then sales becomes a key advocate to sales leadership, field sales becomes an advocate to sales leadership, and the momentum begins from that approach. So optimally, you're getting love from above and input from the rank and file in the field that see the need for it. That's a luxury, I have to admit. Not everyone gets that benefit.
Excellent. We could now pivot to our final segment. I wanted Dave to talk, and it kind of dovetails to Steve's question also, which is, how do you look at measuring not just the composite of your team? And I love this concept that Dave has around thought diversity, outside of things on a resume, just the eclectic nature of both technical as well as financial, as well as industry, and looking at all those variables. But also, Dave has some great experience to Steve's question, how do you look at the efficacy and track the impact of a program? And so we'll kind of now pivot into that third segment here.
This is why I think thought diversity is so important in team building for business value, because we are asking these individuals to navigate multiple domains of complexity. And when we have a 4-hour interview process, we're probing each one of these domain experiences, if you will, to see if they are well-rounded. And so this is a mental model, if you will, that I use in the interview process to see if the individual can deal with what I call horizontal complexity. But to your point, Chad, to slide 17, this is a good set of metrics that you could say are useful in communicating the short-term and the long-term impact of the program for the company and for the board and for leadership. And ultimately is the addition of this program showing accelerated sales cycles. Are we able to show that by including a business value member in the sales engagement that we showed that we could enlarge the deal size? And by the way, we do that by showing the customer it's in their self-interest to accelerate the adoption of the technology. And we routinely see that and are able to show that. We get a lot of feedback from sales that the addition of business value gives the sales team a new sales motion. Very often a team can find themselves blocked at the technical level for whatever reason that might be. And having a different arrow in the quiver, if you will, gives them the ability to maneuver to economic mobilizers and different levels of decision makers, so we can revive an opportunity that gets stalled. We have empirical evidence that shows when you put a well-reasoned business case alongside the sales motion, that you're going to get a higher level of close rate. Ultimately, if you can't, prove value, then you're only left with a price lever. So being able to preserve margin is another basis. So these are all the promises of a business value program. I've seen them used in other environments as well. And ultimately, we compare this against the control group that doesn't get business value. So we have some way of comparing and contrasting internally.
Hey, Dave, John
I have a
Mills
very
here.
Tactical question. So we started looking at the measurements of our impact at the opportunity level, and quickly found that moving it to the account level provided much better information, because once you get engaged, the conversation continues in a different way. Do you measure at the opportunity or the account level?
Very insightful question. We measure at the account level by choice and by design. We actually, it was interesting. We were given a technical choice. The way Salesforce.com was structured for us is you have a choice. Do you want to measure at the account level or the opportunity level? The choice was clear. We want to measure at the account level. And that's how we measure it. And we measure the LTV, lifetime value, at the account level. And that's hard to do at the opportunity level. And often we find that we spend months on an engagement at the opportunity level, and of course the opportunity gets renamed in a different theater by a different leader, and then we've lost our visibility.
Don't you hate that?
Yeah. Right. So absolutely track this at the account level.
Hey, Dave, John Mills here. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
So question, one of the things that we look at, some of the very similar metrics, what kind of delta have you seen, whether it's where you're at today or NetApp or whatever, that you've seen between when they don't engage the value selling methodology versus when they do?
Well, it would be across those different domains. And I can answer it this way. It's been rich enough to be able to accelerate the growth of our team from one individual to now over 10.
Yeah.
So the results are good. A lot of it has to do with what we call the quality of engagement. So, metrics are really just one way of looking at things, but ultimately what really matters is, did we improve the quality of the sale, and what result did we really get here? And so we do after action reviews and really deconstruct what's happening and how did business value make a difference. And I was quite surprised when I reached certain leaders in my organization. They were like, these measurements are all good and helpful and we see them, but ultimately we just know this works and we support it. And it was insightful for me that you can, of course you got to show the metrics and the results, but don't forget the quality of the engagement and the way it changes the sales motion and the ultimate outcome. But ultimately, I think one of the probably most striking statistics has been the growth in LTV, lifetime value.
Mm-hmm.
As it creates, and a way to circle us back to the last point is, if we do this correctly at the account level and position economic value at the leadership level of the company, it creates an engine of opportunities, if you will, that follow. And that tells us that we've successfully positioned the economic value of our solutions and that we're generating opportunities as a result. So that's ultimately the measure that is really important. We've also shown that it can dramatically accelerate the sales cycle. We have pretty long sales cycles in cybersecurity. Networks don't like to change very often. Status quo is the rule, if you will. So we like to show the economic compelling event in the environment, if you will, and that has a big impact on the sales cycle.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, similar results on my end. I was where I'm at now. They're much more metrics driven, so I had to go in and do a whole presentation on the value it brought and revenue per head and stuff like that. But it was back in the Oracle days, we had some of the similar stuff that you have today with the support from upper management, et cetera. Makes a big difference.
Dave, the chat is blowing up here in a good way, so I'm going to try to characterize a couple of questions that have come in and then open it up to members as well. One question that came in from a value leader practitioner was, how do you scale and cross the chasm to scale in your program?
Oh, that's simple.
Just give us the one-word answer.
Yeah. I think it ultimately came down to showing sales leadership how much demand there was for what we were doing. That very quickly, within the space of 9 months to a year, once I hit my stride at doing the alpha test and the beta test, was that the appetite for this in the sales force was way higher than one individual could cover, and it was clear. And so the decision was to add a second individual to prove that we could scale and replicate, and that it wasn't just a one-off thing, right? And so being able to show that this was a replicable and scalable approach was a big step. And then ultimately just proving that out each time we added an incremental business value person to the team, that we kept scaling and replicating that success. And we do that by being really thoughtful about onboarding and team building and knowledge transfer and sharing knowledge within the team, so that our new value managers are replicating the process and learning from the success of the people that came before them.
Excellent. And Dave, another question that came in from the live chat was around your economic feasibility study. And if that is positioned in kind of a really upfront discovery workshop where even the solution hasn't been formed, where is the placement of that study in the overall sales campaign?
As early as possible, we say. Well, I could say optimally it would be at the same time as the POC, and where we're essentially the technical value was roadmapped and we're doing the proof of concept. And just around that stage, we like to position the economic feasibility study and have the foundation to be able to prove the economic value of what they're testing technically. And so we work parallel to that. But optimally, this could never occur too soon. If I had my way, we would be positioning economic discovery as the very first part of the sales motion.
Excellent. Well, there is other feedback coming in. Dave, would you be open if we kind of capsulated this into a series of follow-up questions that we could work with you on for just some Q&A?
Yes, by all means. Yes.
Thank you. So any closing thoughts, Dave, for you or for the members on this, whether it's on the team dynamics of building a team, on the value dimension elements of how to look at the value to the customer, or this last segment we did on how to justify the program and the efficacy of the program? I'd love to let Dave have the final couple of minutes here before we wrap up.
This would be my advice for anyone considering this in their organization. But that, to an earlier point, executive sponsorship is really foundational. I highly encourage it. I would encourage folks to incubate and field test these programs in field sales, where you're very likely to find real support. And in multiple cases, where you would go and scale and replicate this is in the part of the organization that knows how to do that. And in our case, with sales operations. And then spend the time and the energy to integrate the whole program, not only into the sales culture, but into the wider corporate culture, so that value is being discussed in an early formation of your product line, so that product managers and R&D are thinking about how value could be realized and expressed in the marketplace in different ways. And that's been an exciting journey. And really, and not to be minimized, invest in the right infrastructure and tools that can take you.
Dave, thank you so much. I mean, just hard-hitting advice from somebody who's done it in 3 different entities across a long, successful career, 25 years in value management. Terrific member engagement. And again, we will make sure that any questions that didn't get addressed in our hour here, that we do some follow-up and make sure each member gets some insights back from Dave. I want to thank Dave in closing. You know, what makes the ecosystem so special is when we have member-to-member engagement, practitioners talking to practitioners about the real reality of implementing sales transformation. And so Dave's stepping up. I'm just so grateful, and encourage other members, if there's topics that you feel you have a unique voice on, or that you want to help facilitate a next session, please let us know. That's the whole spirit of the ecosystem, is to allow for this reality-based practitioner-to-practitioner discussion to unfold. So we will encourage folks to reach out to Kasha on that front. If we move to just the content agenda, just a little reminder of what's coming up, because we are loaded to bear with some great content. Again, member-driven content. So we're excited. Alex Hesterberg, Chief Customer Officer at Turbonomic, he's going to lead a session that is around outcome mapping. You know, how do you take an outcome that the customer cares about and do a logical chain of reasoning to how your enabling capabilities can support that outcome? And so Alex will be leading that conversation for us coming up. We do have another session after Alex's, which is an author. Steve Thompson has a kind of a best-selling book right now that is on Amazon called The Irresistible Value Proposition. Very excited. Steve is both a member of the ecosystem as well as somebody who's going to share his 25 years of experience in value proposition work. So be on the lookout for that. And then we have, to be determined, we have a sales intelligence platform discussion with Steve Silver, all around sales AI and how we look at the next generation sales excellence platform for sales organizations going forward. That'll be exciting as well. So that's the content. Maybe the only thing we'll end with here is one of the members that you heard from in our prior session was Eric Almquist. So Eric's a partner at Bain, has done research that made the Harvard Business Review, and he's agreed to now become a member of the advisory ecosystem. We're excited by that. And he's made the offer to take his 40 value elements, B2B elements of value, I should say, and put them into a structure that this community can use ongoing. So if you're interested, we already have folks that are signing up, members that are wanting to start to pilot, or as Dave talked about, incubating ideas and testing and retesting and validating. Anyone that's interested in that content or how it could be deployed scalably for some customer conversations, where Kasha's happy to kind of facilitate that dialogue with you and make sure that you have access to those frameworks and platform going forward. So thank you all. I know we're just now at the top of the hour. I thank you for attending. I thank Dave sincerely for sharing his knowledge, his insights across 25 years, and I wish everyone a terrific day, and thank you for a very engaging value management session. Thanks all.